Thank you. So yeah, it's so funny for me because I'm really not coming initially from a tech background. Like I started now 10 years ago, a bit more in tech, but I started my entire career working in politics as a campaign manager. So not running for election myself, would never do that, but being the person behind the curtain that are trying to help people to run for elections. And at first, it sounded like really a different journey, but in the end, I think in both, people are about impact. And that's what I want to bring you as a story today. It's a story of impact and how to bring impact to our communities, how to bring impact to our customers, how to bring impact to basically all the people that are at some point interacting with the work that you're producing. So, hey, it's me. I'm Damien. You have like the phonetic pronunciation if you want to play with that. I studied linguistics and urban planning, so I love this kind of writing. I'm queer, neurodiverse, my attention span is an absolute chaos and mess, but I do like it. And I use they, them pronouns. And when I'm not discussing about politics, accessibility, inclusion, diversity, cities, mobility policies, and all these kind of things, I'm working for justitakeaway.com that you might know in Spain as Just Eat. So it's not so different, but where I'm coming from in Berlin, it's called Lieferando. So quite different from the title of the company itself, where I lead a team that is focusing on all the thing about product experience and inclusivity. And it's a super weird title. I know, it's a super weird way of presenting it, but I will explain that a bit later and why it makes sense. But one of the elements in my career that is always creating a situation where I struggle to present myself is, I think I'm a designer, but at the same time, I'm working at Jet as a product person. I have experiences 6 years or 7 years as an accessibility expert as a front-end engineer. I did UX research at some point in my career. I think I just like people. And it's just really hard when you start to focus on those topics, like inclusivity, to find, what is actually your job? You need to have a bit of tech knowledge. You need to have some design knowledge. You need to have some product knowledge to make the fight right. And in the end, for me, that's just the example that regardless of who you are in the industry, you can make your job, you can make your deliverable and your entire company more diverse and delivering better products. So, all of that to say, let's talk about the making of an inclusive product. Because all of us, all of you, have the power to drive change. Regardless if you're a manager, if you're a leader, if you're an individual contributor, if you're an exec level, maybe, you can all drive change in different way. But first, let's start with a bit of context. Developing technologies is everything except neutral. I am really tired of hearing people being like, yeah, but I'm just pushing code. I'm just doing the design of a view. I have no power. That's not true. You're writing content on the screen. When you're an engineer, you can add, when it's missing because of the designers, some alternative content. You're making choices every single day. Those choices have an impact. And even if you don't think about them, they still have an impact, meaning that they're not neutral. Choosing one technology above the other is not neutral. Choosing a color is not neutral. So from a top-level exec to every single tech worker, the choices that we have an impact on our societies. Because it's not just the users of your product, but it's also the people that are not able to use it. That could be your users, but that are excluded, not on purpose, of course, but by choice, even if it's an unconscious choice. So let me rephrase it differently. Developing technology is political. And it's not a bad word. Please do not consider the word political as something necessarily bad. I'm not saying that it's associated to a party, but it is political because it has an impact on our communities. So quiz time for all of you. Let's say that we are at night. You're either a bit tipsy or you're just extremely tired, meaning that you are somewhat vulnerable. How comfortable would you be giving the information of your name, your picture, your home address, and your phone number to a complete random stranger in the street? Personally, as a queer person, absolutely not. Like, it's freaking me out. Like, because, like, we're still living in cities where queer people are being beat up in the street when they're with the wrong partner. What if this person is picking me up with a cab, with completely tainted glasses, and bringing me to what I hope is my place in a city that I don't know? Imagine that one day someone pitched that in a room, and people were like, oh, fantastic idea, I want that, without asking any question. And that's the kind of situation where you don't have to be necessarily like expert in the domain just to say, I think I have a question. Same, I would take something a bit closer to my heart, but you're having a severe food allergy. How would you feel ordering food without knowing how it's being exactly called, because the restaurant decided to have fancy names for absolutely every dishes, what it includes, because there is only the fancy name that nobody understands, and there is no pictures or nothing to give you information, so you don't know what it looks like. I'm not sure I would feel extremely comfortable. Like, I'm vegetarian, I am having a lactose intolerance. I would like to know what I will do after the evening, and I hope it will not be being on the toilet for a full night. So that's the kind of things where I'm like, even ordering food, like choices have consequences. And trying to make it better for everybody means also being in the teams, being in the rooms, discussing features, being like, did you try to maybe think about the fact that we could bring information next to that? And last example that I absolutely love, it's tomorrow you're going to, I don't know, I did not see the City Hall of Malaga, but let's say you're going to the City Hall of Malaga. And someone is asking you, oh, no, you cannot enter through the front door. But there is a path just there. You have to go to the corner, to the back of the building, and enter through the trash entrance. Then you will have to go through the entire basement, and then you will be able to take an elevator that will bring you to the service that you are requesting. How would you feel about that? I mean, technically it's accessible, like you can access your service. But how would you feel having to enter your university, your city hall, your concert hall, and having systematically to go through the back door, through the trash room, through the heating, boiler rooms, and so on, because that's the only accessible path? That's all the situation. It's basically what we ask people every single day, just because we don't ask ourselves just a minimum amount of questions. And this question is basically, for me, what we're missing, because do you know anybody in your network that is doing that on purpose? Did you ever heard someone in your company that is being like, oh, no, let's build something discriminatory on purpose? I don't. At best, it's hostile design, but I never heard someone being like, no, I want to make it inaccessible. I want people to suffer. I'm coming from Berlin, so suffering is part of the DNA of Berlin, Like, you have to suffer to deserve it. But even there, you still try to make it work for people, because we are about creating the best experience to our customers, not just from a purely altruistic way. It's also how we make business in the end. We're making business by offering good experiences. Okay, that was heavy, I know, and what a way to start the morning, or at least for me to start the morning at 11, but I swear it will get way lighter after. But just after that, all of those questions and all the similar questions that we're asking ourselves end up with one conclusion. We want to do good, but less than 4% of the web is accessible. It's a study made by WebAIM, like an organization that is trying to scan automatically all the web, like all the websites, all the publicly available websites. They did that on the top 1 million most visited home pages. Less than 4% were having no WCAG violations. Less than 4%. And here we're discussing automated testing. And remember, as it was said yesterday in the talk, automated testing can only catch 30 to 40% of the issues on your page. And accessibility is only what's being checked here. We're not discussing about the quality of the language. We're not discussing about how understandable it will be. And we're not discussing about just, is it an inclusive experience? Less than 4%. If you take the entirety of all the discussion, I'm not sure if we are at 1% of the web being truly inclusive for most of us. And yeah, accessibility is only one element of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. You know what we discussed before? That would not be on the checklist from the WCAG. Never, because it's specific to your domain. Upsetting, right? But luckily, there is a solution. And this solution is just all of you. Every single one of you. So you all are the ones that can drive a change. And it starts with the fact that, and that's why I love the fact that we're discussing so much about accessibility, but accessibility is not a nice to have. Accessibility is the absolute bare minimum of what we should deliver. According to the World Health Organization, so not a super progressive and leftist organization by default, like more like, professional, like trying to be neutral, even if you know what I think about neutral stuff. 16% of the world population in 2022 is having a disability. And you can define it in a lot of different ways. And yesterday, was mentioned also the Microsoft framework of inclusive design, and that's also why that's a minimum number. Because next to the people having disabilities, you need to have the temporary impairments, but also the situational one. And it's really this idea of when we want to bring something inclusive, we need to make it work in the end for the people with the biggest need, because in the end it will help solving challenges for everybody. And it's not just a question of number, even if just the number is doing a business case on itself, because 16% is more than the coverage of IE11 on the planet, and there are still companies putting way more money in budgets to continue doing IE11 support and all these kind of things, despite Microsoft putting it on the side. While accessibility is always something that we have to discuss. Is it the moment? Yes, it is the moment. In most markets, there is already a right for customers to use a product or access and being guaranteed of his access by either accessibility or anti-discrimination law. And the US is always taken as an example, Canada is always taken as an example. At JET, for example, we have Israel that is also extremely strong, but the European Union is coming and is coming strong. By 2025, it's all basically all websites that are just not presentational will have somewhat to be accessible in all European markets, because there is regulation, the European Accessibility Act, that will enter in action and that will require that for both public entities but also for private org. So this thing of but it's for public websites to have to be accessible, it's bullshit. It's not just for public companies. More and more the regulations are being made, the legislations are being made in a way that it's both public entities and often not private orgs, but e-commerce. And e-commerce is just enough to be a huge proportion of the web, but also platform and services. So if you have a digital-only product and services, you don't have a way to make it accessible physically. Therefore, you have to make it accessible online. And all of that is what's coming with the European accessibility regulations. But also, hashtag not a lawyer. So this is not legal advice. Please consult your legal department. You know what? They're lovely people. So just discuss with them, because you will see they're not as scary as it seems. And just on this one also, regulations are moving. And one of the change is not just the public versus private entity that is disappearing. It's also the fact that more and more regulations are evolving into not being about accessibility, but about universal design. Norway being one of the first countries having a law on universal design and making the stand of having a nation that is universally accessible and inclusive by 2025, not just accessible through a checklist. So, you have all of that. And on the top of it, if you want to be accessible, you need to think, if you want to be inclusive, you need to think about all the barriers that are also specific to your domain. And I think for me, that's the part that is the absolute most interesting of all. Let's take an example. My work example. You're hungry. You're really, really, really hungry. And you want to order food. So you are using an application, fully accessible, and no, just it is not yet, but we're doing our best to make it work. And we are connecting you to a restaurant that is preparing your food, that will be given to a driver that will bring it to you, and that will allow you to eat your amazing bento. I feel like my mic is leaving my ears. Yes, I think it's better. But that's the best scenario, you know. Sorry. What happened is that this best scenario is not often the case. What can happen a lot is an issue once the driver starts to leave the restaurant with your food and try to find your address. And what happens usually is that they start to be in your neighborhood, and I think one of the biggest feedback that we're getting is people are calling. They are calling you. And personally, I hate being called. So I'm seeing a phone number I don't know. I'm just not answering because we have text messages. What are we calling each other? But, you know, they're trying to call you. It's efficient when you answer. But what if the person is deaf? It's not that they don't want to answer the phone. I'm sure that they would love to get their food. But it's just like they're deaf, or they have social anxiety, or they're autistic, or they have a cognitive impairment, or I just had a ear, nose, throat infection. I was not able to hear at the exit of the plane when I arrived to Malaga for almost half a day because my pressure was like just exploding in my ear. I could not answer a phone. Is your product still working? Technically, the app could be accessible, but they will not get their food. So is your service truly accessible? And without going to this direction, let's say that you have your driver. They arrive to your home, but the restaurant forgot to tell you that there is nuts in your dish, or did not have a way to tell you that there is nuts in your dish, and you're allergic, highly allergic, severely allergic, and you end up to the hospital. I mean, the app is accessible, but we still created a situation where potentially we endanger the life of someone. Our job has real-life consequences. And those are not edge cases. I mean, there is a lot of people having allergies in the world. I'm quite sure that in the end, there is more people having specific diets than people eating absolutely everything. So that's the kind of things where we have to take a step back and think about when we're trying to make a truly inclusive product. And none of that is about checkboxes and checklists. None of that is about going through a list and being like, yep, check, yep, we thought about that, and yes, we thought about that. So your product does not exist in a vacuum. And basically, you have no control over what your users are doing, their environment, the context that they're living on, and their needs. And that's something that we have to live with it. Because even if you have no control, you remain responsible for it. And if you want the good news, is that you have no control, but your manager is having no control either, your boss is having no control, nobody has control. Yet, you're still all responsible, and we have to do our best. Anyway, I hope that you feel empowered from that, being like, we have no control, yet we have to do everything. But it's about being creative and creative solutions for all. I will take another example that is a more joyful one, but you know, Microsoft worked on this amazing game console like the Xbox, like I'm a PlayStation person, but they worked on the Xbox, and they created all this set of inclusion controllers. That's absolutely stunning. That's amazing. But you know what? Is it truly accessible if someone cannot open the box? Because you will get it in the box if it will not be created for you. And that's where, at first, they were super happy, and then they were like, oh shit, I think we forgot something. And they came up with that, which is basically a way for anybody to be able to open their box without any struggle, regardless of your mobility, regardless of your motion, regardless of your age and the preciseness of your movements, in order for you to be able to access the experience in a way that is comfortable. It's amazing for people with motion impairments, but gosh, I want all my packagings to look like this. Like, how much time do we lose trying to open packages that are absolutely awful? And that is part of your product. When you're a designer, your product doesn't exist in a vacuum. You also have to think about how do you deliver it? How do you onboard people? How do you put it literally out of the box? And that's how to think about your product, not in a vacuum, and think about your customers in a full setup. And I really need to go faster. So, as a guiding principle, be intentional. That's the point here. Like the counterpart of being politic, having an impact, is being intentional about it. So, first, we are only expert into our own experiences. I don't know your life, I don't know your barriers, and I can only make assumptions about them. Assumptions are terrible because they're systematically wrong. You might have chance, might be right for once, but overall, they will be wrong. So humility, openness, and collaborations is essential because that's what will make improvements in the long run. We will push live, even when we care about inclusion and we want to drive a change, we will push awful experiences and we will fix them. And that's how you build. You push elements, you fix them. Agile. I hate agile, but sometimes there is good thing into that. The fact that you don't just push something in the world and not care about it. You are systematic in this idea of constant rework, rethinking about it, rescoping it, and trying to see how you can drive change in the long run. So there is this question of, be open, be humble, think about people. And one of the mistake that we often do is that we think about personas, we think about group of demographic and clusters and so on. And when we're doing this, it's super useful from a data point, but we forgot the humanity of the people behind it. And that's usually where we are taking usually shortcuts that we're but that's serving people without really caring about, but what is the value that we're bringing? So when you have all those elements, when you start thinking about it, when you start thinking about people, one of the elements is also accepting failure and owning your mistakes, because it's the only way to fix it after and to come back to it. And recognizing our privilege. I will not enter all the topics of social privileges, but we're working in tech. We're having one of the few industries where, despite the layoff, we are kind of okay. And we are kind of okay. We have jobs for the next 30 years. Even with the AI, we will have jobs for the next 30 years. So we are in a situation where not everybody is using your app like you do. And that's what was discussed yesterday too, with the idea of, in several different parts of the world, we're not using tech the same way. We're not having the same pillars on what do we consider being a good experience. And all of that is about asking yourself, what is your view on a topic, and what are your privileges, and how you can use them, not to influence the experience for people, but to use this position of privilege to leverage the privilege for good. So neutrality was never an option. Staying silent is, as usual, being complicit. So now, let's get our hands dirty. Let's drive change. First thing, as we said, no perfectly accessible experience. We cannot deliver something that will work for absolutely everybody. That does not exist. Some of our needs are competing with each other. And that's fine. That's where we have to work on customization, personalization, and all those kind of really fancy topics. Because that's how we propose the best experience, by letting people control it. Oh, even less control for you, again. But more control for your end users, which is where the true value of inclusivity is. Giving away some control, being vulnerable with your product, so people can control their experience. But for that, no perfectly accessible experiences, and the same, there is no perfectly inclusive services. So if there is no perfect answer, you don't have to be an expert. You're an expert in your own life. That's already fairly great, to be honest, and you're already having a nice opinion on your life, on your views and so on. Use that. But if you also don't have to be an expert, you cannot drive change alone. You cannot be the only person having the weight of accessibility and inclusion on your shoulders. All the people that I saw in startup being the accessibility experts, the voice of accessibility, the voice of inclusion and diversity in a startup or even in bigger corporations are burning out. Because you cannot do this alone. The weight of the world is too big for your shoulders. You're not Atlas. Don't try. And because of all of that, you cannot be the only one. Meaning that you have to change your strategy. And instead of doing, you have to ask yourself, what is more powerful? Is it you delivering code, delivering design that is accessible, or you being a multiplier and asking questions to other people so they can think differently and deliver change? Be a multiplier. The impact will always be greater than yourself delivering accessible code and accessible design. Yet, please deliver accessible code and accessible design. As I said, bare minimum, but it should not be your responsibility alone. And yeah, you don't need a title to lead change. we can all lead change, because leading change is about pushing for questions. It's about being this person just poking in the meeting room. What if? Did we think about? Did we discuss with? The power of asking questions is unlimited. And you will never be blamed for asking questions. But you will raise, at least you will put light on some specific element. So this is important because even if you are pushing the best code, it will be destroyed by someone. Even if you're doing the best design, it will be destroyed by someone else. And it's fine, because, we're only working on digital experiences in the end. Someone will not die in an hospital directly because of that. Or maybe, yes, today it might, because we have JavaScript embedded in more and more devices. But still, we will break things, and that's okay as long as we fix it. So we need to accept that. And one way of accepting this is also to remove some of the load from your shoulders. I said it will be lighter after the first part. Not every battle is worth fighting for. You will not have a 100% accessible and inclusive experience. Don't exhaust yourself on every single fight. I have a strategy for that. I'm asking 3 questions. What's the risk? When someone told me, oh, we have to drop the accessibility requirement on something right now. We will do it later, but we have to go live before. What's the risk? Fairly question. It can be answered legally. There is potentially fine and so on. What's the risk? What's the impact? How many customers will actually be impacted by the fact that we will not deliver something that would be good for them? And what are the opportunities after? Yeah, okay, they will go live with something you did not manage to fight to make it accessible or inclusive. It's fine if you have opportunities to come back to it later. And even if it's something that was not dropped, but you just see a page that is awfully inaccessible, and the screen readers, for example, are extremely struggling with it. Bare accessibility requirements not working. Here, think about what opportunities we have. If you know that there is a project starting in 2 months from now that is on this page, don't exhaust yourself to make fixes. Think about what you can include in this project to make it better. Think about risk, impact, and opportunities. And bonus point, if it ties to the vision and the mission and objective of the business. Just Eat tries to empower every food moment. Empower every food moment means every food moment, including when you have your broken leg, a broken arm, and injuries, when you have disabilities, where you're just lazy, because let's face it, making food is great, but it's also super time-consuming, and we don't have time for that. So all these kind of things, if it's tied to the vision, bonus points. And all of that can be powered through the unexpected power of candid questions. Don't make it a political statement, but just make it work in a way that is being just what if, Did we think about it? Oh, we will work on that. Can we just include some more tickets about it? Oh, we will work on a new page. Yeah, I saw this color being used outside of the value system that we have and so on, and it's not accessible. Let's rephrase it. All these kind of elements, ask candid questions. Don't make it a political fight. Create a situation where people have to fight to not get common sense prioritized rather than you fighting to get something prioritized. So all of that to say, be an ally, use your own voice, and federate your colleagues. By asking questions, the overall goal is that you don't have to do the work. You are putting the work on other people. And that's where you create the multiplier effect. So changes in movement, it's time for some structure. I will go quite fast on that, but I just wanted to show you what we did once we had this setup, where we had this culture of questioning, and we wanted to make it more professional in some way. Because in the end, every team impacts the overall experience. So who owns it? Which is always the question. Who owns the experience in the end? And I love this sentence from Ludon that worked for the UK government into the service design team and led, I think, the service design teams. Services in the internet age don't obey organizational boundaries. A good service is agnostic to organizational structure. AKA, your customers don't give a fuck about your teams. They don't care if your team is owning one part of the platform and another team is owning the other part of the platform. That's not their problem. Their problem is they selected a restaurant, they cannot access the menu. They're stuck. And the fact that it's 2 teams, 3 teams, 4 teams, yeah, doesn't matter to them. They're still stuck, and it sucks. So good service are agnostics to organizational structures. And I started from that to rethink the approach to solution and to push for a new structure at Jet. And that's the team that I'm leading now. And one of the main principles that we have for that is solving for one, extending to many people. And solving for the highest need when we have problems to make sure that it's a good experience for everybody. And that's how we came up with the mission statement for my team, which is that we have a product experience team that is not having a lot of engineers, that is not having a lot of designers and so on, because our function is to support our organization, not directly deliver. In defining and delivering a cohesive, so design system, high quality, so making sure that we have a inclusive product experience, and inclusive with food inclusivity, product inclusivity, and so on, experience through a spirit of collaboration across boundaries. So that's basically the team that I lead. And the goal here was really to have a set of people that are outside of the day-to-day of your backlog and being able to say, hey, what about that? So we do not own any part of your journey, but instead we collaborate with all the different owners, meaning that we own the journey while they own the features. And for that, some of the key vectors of success are trust, working and building communities, and relying on empowerment. So leveraging your internal communities. I will share the slides so you will be able to access that, but first be conscious of your own biases. That's the best place to be humble and open with people. And create a culture where people can just reach out to you, and by doing this, you will unlock new experiences and remove barriers just by having people from minority backgrounds, queer people, women, people of color, people that are disabled, people that are neurodiverse, that will be able to say, hey, I'm struggling with this feature. Why did we make this choice? Why did we go this direction? Next time when you rework on it, can we just discuss it before? And all this kind of element. That's the power of communities. Because everyone experiences life differently. So we have to rely on internal communities, and we have to do it more. Also, you in your work, don't hesitate to reach out to other people. The best way to avoid mistakes is basically to share your work. And because people can alert you, raise concerns, highlight opportunities. And they're definitely undervalued. And if someone asks you, what is the business value of it? The business value is a better product market fit. You're having a product that works for more people. More people means usually more money. So it's a really hard way to say it to an executive level, but it's true. 15% of the world is having a disability. More having temporary impairments. So that's your opportunity. It's creating better market fits through making collaboration as your key driver. So do not rely on your assumption, ask confirmation, ask feedback, create safe spaces where people are comfortable, ensure the diversity of samples that you have. You don't have to be a UX researcher for that. You can just ask a question when you're seeing a UX research report and being like, hey, did we interview those people? So in the end, be curious. That's the point. Be just open and curious. Ask questions. So yeah, now you're ready to push it to your business strategy. And that's a completely other discussion, more for leaders and so on. But if you did all of that, you did not need a leadership title, but you're worth a leadership title now. Because that's all the soft skills that are required from you to move from usually career level, senior position, to lead position. It's not about how expert you are. It's about how can you drive change. So inclusive products require being intentional. It's about constantly learning, fixing, improving, a never-ending commitment. So from that, you can plan, sponsors, incentives, create incentives, and create measurable indicators. That's basically the only difference between being a contributor asking questions and being a manager trying to drive change. But everything else is the same. So in a nutshell, think about your impact, ask questions, have empathy, raise concerns, and commit to bringing a positive change. Thank you.